Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to read chapter 14, all of it, from my book, Seven Sisters, The Voyage. The seven sisters celebrated their last meal from the cooking galley as they sat at the table in the center of their sleeping quarters. "I'll not miss this tasteless food," Caroline said as she picked at her bowl of beans. "At least we have something to eat," said Lizzie. "When we leave the ship, we won't know when or where our next meal will come from." Lavinia brought her tin cup to her lips and clamped her teeth on the edge. She tipped it up slowly and tried to strain some liquid from the black soup in her cup. Setting it down with a tremendous shudder, she could stand it no longer. "I am looking so forward to drinking fresh water when we get to Castle Garden." "Hear, hear," said Eleanor. "But in the meantime, we must keep moisture in our bodies. So hold your noses, sisters, and drink." The twins were so used to the texture of the water that it didn't really bother them. They drained their cups obediently as the others struggled with theirs. Susanna had gone to the cooking galley during this exchange. When she got back, she had an important announcement to make. "The steward said the saints can take the few remaining stores from the supply room for their overland journey, since they were procured and paid for by the church before we left. I asked President Tippett, and he said our ward is scheduled to get our share in 20 minutes. The sisters were grateful for the security this would give them as they started their overland journey. After standing in line and each receiving what appeared to be rations for about 2 days, they tucked them into every corner of their carrying baggage. Then one by one they trickled to the top deck to await the announcement that they could go ashore. Caroline was the first to arrive, and she moved directly to the bulwark. As she leaned over the side, looking down at all the activity on the wharf, she overheard Brother James Bennett address President Hart a few feet away from her. "President Hart, may I speak with you?" Before Brother Bennett could continue, Hart interjected. "I can see by your face that you are without funds to complete your journey." "How did you know that?" asked Brother Bennett. "That's the worst part of my job, brother, to turn down saints who don't have enough money to pay their railway fare from New York to Florence." Bennett's face fell at the mention of turning down saints. Hart tried to let him down easy. "We try to make it thoroughly understood throughout the missions that it is out of the power of the church agent to extend any aid to those who are destitute. It is not that we don't want to, but we simply cannot. There would be too many who would plead for this privilege. We have such a multitude of other cares and duties that it is extremely unjust to ask us to make these concessions." Brother Bennett was struggling to keep from breaking down. "You will need to find employment in this area until you have earned enough money to buy your tickets," said President Hart. Brother Bennett could see the prudence of this policy, but didn't quite grasp how he would accomplish it. Brother Hart continued, "What is your trade, brother?" "I am a stonemason." Hart got an encouraging smile on his face as he patted Brother Bennett on the shoulder. "I'm sure the city of New York will be getting federal assistance to clean up and rebuild. That means a lot of new bricks." Brother Bennett's face brightened as he grabbed Hart's hand and pumped it gratefully. "Thank you, President, thank you," he said, and then rushed to tell his wife of the new challenges that awaited them. It was time. Captain Hudson directed Mr. Huntley to take the megaphone below and announce for all to assemble top deck in preparation for debarking. Only a few stragglers were on the 'tween decks, and when they heard the official word from Huntley, they hurriedly finished their tasks to join everyone topside. The last straggler arrived just as President Bramwell was having his final say. "Captain Hudson and all of your crew, by unanimous vote of the company, I am requested to tender you the thanks of our hearts and their sincere prayers that God may reward you by administering the richness of his bounty, health, peace, and enduring happiness to you and yours." The saints clapped loudly. The captain stepped forward. "Thank you most kindly, President Bramwell. I, in turn, would like to say, may your trip across the states be one of pleasure. And when this is past and you are encamped upon the western prairies," he paused and couldn't go on. Everyone could see he was getting choked up. Then he stammered, "May your thoughts wander back with pleasure to your ocean voyage on the Amazon." On Bramwell's left, President Palmer spontaneously shouted, "Let's have 3 cheers for the good old ship and 3 cheers for the captain and crew." The saints were completely enthusiastic as they yelled, "Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray!" With that cue, the dependable Cardiff band struck up Auld Lang Syne, and the saints wept as they shook hands with the captain and crew on their way to depart the gangway. As the saints inched forward, the twins spotted Huntley over to the side, securing some lines. Giggling with enthusiasm, they ran to him. "Mr. Huntley! Mr. Huntley!" He turned to see them, and kneeling on one knee, he caught them in his arms and gave them a tremendous hug. Susanna trailed behind her sisters with her birdcage in hand. Huntley finally released the girls, and with misty eyes he whispered, "I'm sure gonna miss you two." Then, clearing his throat, he got control of his voice. "But as soon as I get back to Ireland, I'm going to introduce my wife to Mormonism. I hope she'll be as wound up about it as I am. And if she is and joins the church, I plan to bring her out to Utah as soon as I can arrange it. Maybe we can be neighbors." "Perfect," said the twins, laughing that they had said the same word together again. Then Huntley ventured, "Did you say your mother and older brother had settled in Cache Valley?" Susanna began to laugh. "Yes, it's Cache Valley, but it's spelled C-H-C-H-E, not C-A-S-H, as in money." "Darn the luck, that's too bad," said Huntley, chuckling. "Well, we'll still look you up and see if we can get a homestead nearby." "That's a promise," said Fanny. Then she took the birdcage from Susanna. "Mr. Huntley, to remind you of us while we're apart, we want you to have Dovey." Huntley became thoughtful. "Twinsies, I'd love to keep Dovey, but I'm afraid he might die if I take him back across the ocean." The girls became gloomy. Then it came to Huntley. "Do you know what I think is the very best thing to do with him?" he said. "What?" the twins asked with hope in their eyes. "Let's set him free. This is the land of the free, isn't it?" The twins looked at each other, then at Susanna, who nodded her approval of the suggested plan. Phoebe was quick to go along. "That's a good idea, Mr. Huntley. Let's let him go free, Fanny." Fanny's mind finally clicked acceptance, and she opened the cage door and took the little bird out. Then, holding it in both hands, she proclaimed, "Fly away home, little sparrow. Find your nest and your wife and your children." Then she let the bird go, and it headed straight for the trees in the distance. Phoebe watched as the bird flew out of sight. "Look, he knows right where he's going." "And so do I now," said Huntley. "Thanks for everything, Mr. Huntley," Fanny said. Both twins and Susanna gave him another big hug before they joined the departing crowd. When Eleanor approached the line of crewmen and began thanking each one, she noticed Titus leaning on his crutches at the end of the line, standing back from the others. As she drew closer, he hobbled up to the line, barely using his crutches. "Titus, you're almost walking by yourself," she exclaimed. "You've made so much progress that before long you'll be able to throw your crutches overboard." Titus spoke in a low voice. "Sister Wise, could I speak to you in private?" Eleanor hesitated, looking to see if any of the crew had heard his request. They seemed preoccupied with grateful saints. "Well, I don't know," she said uneasily. Titus persisted. "Just over there by the bulwark. I swear on my mother's eyes I won't harm you." Eleanor suddenly felt calm as she walked to the bulwark with Titus. "I know I told you thank you when you gave me these crutches, but I didn't say what I really wanted to say." Titus fiddled with the buttons on his jacket. I don't know exactly how to tell you this. I want to say, in the fog, I shouldn't have..." And then he suddenly blurted it out. "It's just that you're so smart and good and beautiful. I know I'd never be fit for a lady like you. I was mad at you for that. I never heard anything good about Mormons before. I guess I just wanted to bring you down to my level." He continued to pour out his heart. I want you to know that I've felt the shame and guilt of what I did to you with every lash I got. I deserve them all and more." By now he was trembling and tears were forming in his dark eyes. "I just want to say that I'm very, very sorry, and I'm asking you for your forgiveness." Eleanor was overwhelmed by this act of contrition. She held her handkerchief to her nose for a few seconds until she could speak. "Titus, that means a great deal to me. You've changed so much during this ordeal, and you've changed my mind about you. I accept your apology and forgive you with all of my heart." Titus wiped his cheeks with the backs of his hand, then raised his head up to look into her eyes. "Thank you," he said humbly. Eleanor extended her hand. "Goodbye, Titus. I am pleased to have served you." Titus took her hand in both of his. I'm glad I got a chance to sail with the Mormons," he said. They shook hands and smiled at each other, locking eyes for a long moment. The wharf was busy. Soldiers patrolled up and down, and merchants and vendors who weren't affected by the riots had set up their wares. Dock workers moved cargo in and out of ships, and every kind of carriage and wagon waited to take travelers to their destinations. There were gangs of sharpers and pickpockets huddled together, trying to stay out of the way of the soldiers. They were sizing up potential marks from the immigrants and the passengers who were coming down the gangways. But when 800 saints from the Amazon merged with the Gentiles on the wharf, it became hard to tell who was who. The saints had been instructed to stay together while they waited for the barges that would take them to Castle Garden. But soon they were infiltrated with all kinds of characters who were offering them deals, selling them overpriced foodstuffs for the next part of their journey, and generally distracting them so their associates could take advantage of them. The seven sisters were fascinated by all the activity around them, saying no thank you as they were approached with bargains you can't afford to miss. Soon the sisters became the center of one man's attention. "I have a boarding house just 5 blocks away that will house all you fine-looking ladies," he said, tipping his hat and revealing a head of oily, thinning hair. "I am the proprietor, and I can surely find you some good employ," he said as he leered at the sisters, sizing up their earning potential. Phoebe was oblivious to his pandering and announced, "We are going to Salt Lake City." "In Utah," added Fanny. The sharper laughed as he realized he was dealing with some of those devout Mormons that periodically came through the New York docks. "Why would you want to go to Utah?" he asked mockingly. "There's nothing there but desert, grasshoppers, Indians, and a hostile federal government." Lavinia got a contented look on her face. "Ah, home, sweet home," she exclaimed dramatically. The sharper went on the offensive. "I'll guarantee that when you get to Utah, you won't find Mormonism the same as it is in England." Eleanor took over. "Sir, we have received counsel not to form unrealistic expectations of life in Zion. There will be trials and hardships. There will be both good and bad people. There will be temptations as well as positive opportunities. The Zion we find in Utah, as in any place, will be the Zion we bring in our hearts. One's faith has to be based on the gospel, not the people. Thank you for your offer, but as you can see, we are not interested. Good day." The sharper was quite astounded at this outburst of zeal. Seeing he was wasting his time, he muttered some unintelligible profanity and disappeared into the crowd to look for other young girls to recruit for his boarding house. "That's the third sharper who has approached us since we stepped off the ship," said Susanna with disgust. "The riots certainly haven't stifled their greediness," said Lavinia. Just then, 2 young men in rather shabby clothes came chasing through the crowd. One of them bumped into Caroline, flipped her around, and almost knocked her over. He tipped his cap and immediately made his apologies as the other lad brushed her off. "Begging your pardon, miss, very clumsy of me." "Quite all right," Eleanor muttered, slightly dazed. "No bother." "Welcome to New York City," the other boy yelled as he and his chum continued down the wharf, hardly slowing down at all. Caroline straightened her hat and adjusted her waistcoat and skirt. Then panic ensued as she felt around her waistline. "Sister," she cried, "my purse is gone. They took my purse." Eleanor ran to Caroline. "Can you see them?" Caroline stood on her tiptoes and then jumped up and down, trying to see over the crowd. "No," she said with fear in her voice. Eleanor grabbed Caroline's hand and dragged her through the crowd. President Tippett," she yelled as they came up to him. "Two sharpers just stole Caroline's purse." Caroline sputtered. "One lad bumped into me and the other cut my purse strings when I was distracted." She held up what was left of the drawstring. President Tippett ran to Bramwell, who in turn shouted orders to those standing near him to spread out and comb the wharf for the two pickpockets who had stolen Sister Cleverly's purse. The brethren took off searching, but in a few minutes reported back to Bramwell empty-handed. "We scouted the area, but it's useless to try to find the culprits in this throng of people," one said. Caroline was hysterical as her sisters tried to comfort her. Soon she announced through big sobs, "All is lost." Then her eyes grew big. "Oh, I feel strange. My hands are tingling." Eleanor quickly moved her to the edge of the crowd and had her lie down on the wharf. She placed Lavinia's valise under Caroline's feet and tried to calm her down. "Breathe slowly, Caroline," she directed. After a few minutes, Tippett and Bramwell approached Eleanor and Caroline with the bad news that her purse was long gone. Caroline started sobbing again. "Now I have no money to go on to Florence." President Bramwell knelt down by her side. "Sister Cleverly, if they took the money for your ticket, there's nothing I can do except see if President Hart has a solution." "President Hart has no sympathy," Caroline wailed in despair. "I heard him reject a plea from a brother just this morning." "Let's ask him anyway," said President Bramwell, waving President Hart over. The sisters helped a revived Caroline up and gathered around to help present her case. Hart's answer was what Caroline expected. "I'm very sorry, Sister Cleverly. We just cannot make any exceptions." Caroline was beside herself. "But I don't know a soul in this country. What will I do? How will I earn money? I have no skills whatsoever." All the sisters were in tears now. "Please, President Hart," begged Susanna, speaking for the rest. "All I can do is see that you get settled with a family here in New York City." It wasn't fair, Lizzie thought. Caroline was a delicate flower, being transplanted into a field of weeds and told to survive for a season or two. She just wasn't strong enough. Lizzie turned and looked up at the Amazon. She scanned the top deck, and to her surprise, only one crewman was in sight. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized it was Alfie. He was leaning over the bulwark, looking down at the crowd on the wharf. She wondered if he could see her. Then her answer came as he took the gold nugget out of his pocket, looked in her direction, and kissed it. Then he tossed his head back as if to say, "My offer still stands, m'lady." Turning back, Lizzie suddenly interjected, "President, could Caroline go on to Utah using the Perpetual Immigration Fund?" "Oh, those funds have all been allocated for this season," said President Hart. "But what if I gave Caroline my letter?" There was a unanimous intake of breath from the sisters. "Lizzie, you can't do that," spoke up Caroline. "Then you wouldn't have a way." President Hart said, "If you relinquish your spot, Sister Cornell, then I suppose Sister Cleverly could step in and take it." "Then that is what I wish to do," said Lizzie decidedly. "What are you saying, Lizzie?" asked Eleanor. "I love you sisters, just as if you were my real sisters," said Lizzie, pouring out her heart. "But I have made a decision to stay here in New York with Alfie." "But Lizzie," Phoebe cried, "you can't break up our 7 sisters. Who's going to teach us how to cook?" blubbered Fanny. "And wash," Caroline said. "And dance," Lavinia added. "Alfie promised he would bring me to Utah in a couple of years," said Lizzie, "and I'm holding him to that promise." Hart became solemn. "This is a serious decision, Sister Cornell. You will be leaving the safety of the saints, and the percentage of sailors who make it to Utah isn't very high, if past shipboard romances have been any indication. He's taking me to San Francisco to the gold fields, and when we get rich, we'll be coming to Salt Lake City. You can count on it. My mind is fixed." President Hart could see her determination, and finally spoke with resignation. "Then you have the letter?" "Right here," she said, pulling it out of her shoe and presenting it to Caroline, who was weeping gratefully. The sisters then grabbed Lizzie and hugged her intensely as they cried together. Alfie was watching all this unfold from the bulwark, and seeing that Lizzie had given up her letter, he surmised she was going to stay with him, and gave a loud whoop as he smashed his fist in the air. Then he rushed down the gangway to meet her. She in turn ran into his arms, where they held each other tightly. Then with a joyful kiss they rekindled their dreams. The sisters were still crying, but Brother Larkin came along the wharf, when Brother Larkin came along the wharf to invite the saints to load the barges. When they were finally situated on their barge, the 6 remaining sisters looked up and waved at Lizzie and Alfie, who were now at the top of the ship. He had his arms around her shoulder and would alternately squeeze her to him or kiss her cheek as they waved goodbye to the sisters. "I'll see you again, sisters," she waved from the bulwark. "Take care. I love you all." "How can we let her go?" said Susanna as she comforted the crying twins. "She's such a part of us." Before long, the first barge was pulled out into the river, but the barge with the sisters on it remained secured at the dock. President Bramwell hadn't given their pilot the signal to leave yet. He just stood on the wharf talking nonchalantly to President Tippett. It had been almost 2 hours since the saints had left the ship. An emotional 2 hours, and the sisters' spirits were very low as they waited and pondered everything that had just happened. However, their interest perked up when they spotted President Hart approaching the barge with a young mother-to-be at his side. She was dressed differently from the saints of the British Isles. No hat, but a small white cap covered her hair. The colors of her skirt and jacket were decidedly brighter than the Brits wore. The white apron, starting under her bodice, helped hide her pregnant condition as it fell to the bottom of her skirt. Her face was blotchy red, and she dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. President Hart stepped on the edge of the dock in front of Bramwell. "President, I have a young sister here from the Synosure, whose husband it was that died of measles. She has passed the doctor's inspection and is now traveling alone." Then he got a little embarrassed at his faux pas. Well, not entirely alone. The saints who heard him say this politely chuckled as they realized the sister was within a few weeks of delivering her baby. "President Tippett, could we place this sister with your 6 single sisters?" said Bramwell. "I understand they are unhappy that their lucky 7 has been broken up." President Tippett turned to the 6. "What do you say, sisters?" The sisters looked at each other and smiled. "Yes," chimed the sisters before anyone else could speak. "Most assuredly. Of course. How wonderful." Caroline stood up to help the young woman onto the barge. "Welcome, sister. I think you will fit in just perfectly with us." "Tell us about yourself," said Susanna as she helped balance her by her other hand. The young woman smiled shyly and then stammered in broken English. "Hello, my name is Alinda May Polson from Denmark." And that's the end of chapter 14. Over and out.